I know Austin is known for keeping it weird, but I gotta say, I think today's officers kept it real. Hi friends, welcome to today's badge cam lesson here at Active Self-Protection. I'm your host, John Correa.
I'm your co-host, Mike Williver. Today's video comes to us from the state capital of Texas, Austin.
You need a shot timer because that which gets measured gets worked on. The Range Tech Timer is the official timer of Active Self-Protection because it is versatile, reliable, feature-rich, and very economical. Check out all it can do at the link below.
911 has received calls about somebody standing in their yard and shooting an AR-15 in the neighborhood here. And of course, that is what is going to bring all the boys to the yard. So we see this guy here kind of standing in the yard, and he's gonna talk a little bit on the surveillance footage here and talk to somebody inside the house. Now we know, because we've seen what happens at the end, there's nobody in there. Let's hear what he says.
Yeah. You want this?
So he's talking to nobody. He's talking to himself, clearly having some kind of a psychotic break or something like that. But you're about to hear that he's going to talk some more, and then he's going to shoot multiple times into the house.
Are you sure? Oh my God, you're fucking stupid. You're fucking stupid.
Officers heard those shots as they pull up, and they are going to get out having heard this guy shooting his AR-15.
It wasn't me. Fuck.
Suspects down, hands are up.
It wasn't me.
Show your hands, do it now!
It wasn't me.
Draw the gun! Where is he? David 309, shots taken, suspect down.
Suspects down, hands are up. Show us your hands, do it now! You good?
Yeah, I'm good. 309,
Hey,
giving
come to
command.
us, come to us. Yep. Guns on the ground.
AR-15's on the ground.
Okay, you ready? Move up, move.
Have EMS stage, we're moving up.
You good, Daniel?
I'm good.
Okay.
Watching the door. Clear.
Got it. Move past, move past. Push past us, Frito. No. I'll hold lethal.
Austin police! Anybody in here?
Hook him, hook him. Hook him. You get it? Hook him off the cooker, okay?
Yep. Roll over on your stomach, buddy. So we can help you. Roll on your stomach so we can help you.
He's having trouble.
The shots that the officer took proved to be fatal shots. Those shots were determined by the department to be consistent with policy, though this man's mom and brother are very upset. I put news stories in the description, and they want more police training to do more de-escalation. Now, Mike, I know there's going to be some questions here about did they identify themselves or whatever, but dude shooting an AR up in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's not a good look to be asking someone, do you want some of this with your AR? That's kind of the antithesis of what we're trying to do in the 2A community.
So Mike, I think at the beginning here, let's see if we can spot the place where the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms goes terribly awry in this particular case. I do think that, again, you got a right to carry a firearm on your own property. You got a right to own an AR-15. You got a right to have that on your property. But of course, at some point, you start shooting it into the house. You start shooting it inside city limits, not in a defensive manner. Of course, that evaporates.
Yeah, absolutely, John. You said a little bit earlier, the family is very upset. Look, I'm never mad. I never take umbrage at a family for being upset when their loved one is killed by the police, no matter how justified the shooting might have been. Of course they're upset. They lost their loved one. They probably knew this guy had some issues and potentially were worried about something like this might happen. And lo and behold, it has finally happened. Yeah, I know we're going to get comments where people are saying, well, he's on his own property. Well, he's, he could have been chasing this guy out to defend, or could have been chasing out a burglar to defend his home or whatever. And look, there's no perfect scenario in law enforcement. That could have possibly been the case. That's a possibility. As it turns out, it wasn't what happened. What happened was he was having a really, really bad night and decided to start shooting at no one inside his own home and drew a lot of attention from the police. And this is a predictable result, unfortunately.
And now listen, what the officer sees when he gets out, he hears shots fired in the neighborhood, hears them as he approaches. You can see the officer on the right-hand side, and his visual that he has here is a guy who is holding an AR-15 and, again, holding that rifle in his hands, having just heard shots fired, having come to that. Now, come to find out, he got the right guy, and I get it. Some people are going to be like, well, they don't know if he's investigating or whatever, and they should have maybe warned more. Well, you're balancing that idea of warning, hey, man, drop the gun, versus, man, this guy is shooting the neighborhood up, and I'm at risk and the entire neighborhood's at risk, and there's a balancing here. I don't blame the officer for what he did.
And the difference here, John, is this guy has a long gun with an optic on it. I mean, it looks like it might be a crummy optic. We know that from having looked at the video in freeze frame. There's no way for the officer to know that. Now, I think at the end of the day, if you think someone's breaking into your house, we don't want you chasing them out front, God forbid, or going outside of the house with your gun. If they're leaving, let them leave. Let the police deal with that bad guy. Because if you are, assuming this was a legitimate situation and he was chasing off a bad guy, being out front with a rifle, you're now putting yourself at jeopardy for something like this happening. So I think the lesson here for our private citizens is, if someone's breaking into your house, try to stay inside and use that front door as a protection against this sort of thing. Now, I don't forget, we had a video where a guy was in his own house, and there was a lot of angry comments about that. What people don't realize, I think, is we made another video amending some of our thoughts on that particular situation. So go back and check those out when you get a chance.
Yeah, and here, again, one little thing as well. This is one of the reasons as a private citizen, I have a sling on my home defense AR-15. Because again, if God forbid I have to go outside, I'd really rather not have that gun in my hand. If I worry there's an actual threat out there, then I'm not going outside there, right? Unless one of my loved ones is out there, you call the cops and let them deal with the problem. So instead, that's why I don't have a rifle in my hand. It's one of the reasons that I keep a sling on my home defense gun. Now that's what the officer saw, shoots him here, and then shoots again. And I know, again, there's going to be some frustration with the fact that, well, that last shot, the guy had his hand in the air. And I will note he's turned very much sideways to the officer at this point, and I'm not sure that the officer can see that he's dropped the gun. We're talking in split seconds here, and I really think that even with those split seconds, again, I see the officer perceiving, or reasonably perceiving, that there's still a deadly threat. And at some point, yes, you got to stop. And I think the officer did stop as soon as the guy went down, even though with a rifle he could still have potentially been a threat. That's the sign to the officer that he's definitively changed the guy's behavior. So once again, I don't have a problem with this. I think it's justified conduct.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what you like to talk about all the time, John, just human performance. Even if he had perceived it, the split second it takes for his brain to process that and change the officer to change what he's doing, it takes a second. Literally takes a second for him to stop doing what he's doing. I think, if I had to guess, it's dark, it's a wonky lighting situation, it's a weird angle. So there's a lot of things being brought to bear in the situation that I make it so that I can't judge that officer for that last shot. I think he stopped shooting as soon as he could reasonably perceive that the threat was gone.
And listen, I really think it's a great idea that the officers have patrol carbines. This is one of the reasons I think they should have patrol carbines, because this is the kind of thing that they face. Also, I'm just going to stop here a second, Mike, and say that I think that every officer should have a patrol carbine. Absolutely. And if a department can't fund them, they should certainly authorize officers to carry their own once they qualify with them. And also here, I see some clues that this officer is fairly well clued in with his defensive carbine. I see a large ambi charging handle. I see a big window optic that would be great for anything inside of probably 200 yards. I see what looks to me to be a high-power white light on his gun, and I see a sling. So I see a rifle here that is fairly well set up. I mean, could we argue about little bits and pieces here and there? Sure, fine. But I see a rifle that's effectively set up as a patrol carbine, and that tells me some things. So listen, officers, set your gun up right.
Yeah, Austin PD, if you're watching, I know somebody at Austin PD is probably watching, have this guy reach out to me, Mike at ActiveCellProtection.com. That is a pretty squared away rifle. I taught M4 to our agents for years. And, you know, some agents would show up with some pretty wacky stuff going on with their rifle. We even saw an EOT, excuse me, I'm about to say it wrong, a running joke with me and John, an EOTech on backwards, which was interesting. And that wouldn't have worked out well in the field. But this guy appears to know what he's doing. I love the fact that he has a sling on his rifle. He looks like he's been around the block and he's ready to do what he has to do. So kudos to him.
Now, I will say that we've seen plenty of those EOTechs fail in class a lot. That wouldn't be my first choice. But again, now we're talking gear stuff and that's really secondary. He gets up and has to take about a 20 to 25 yard shot here, which with a patrol car being properly set up like this one should not be all that difficult a shot. Now, you know I'm gonna give him a hard time about the sling here. That either you gotta secure the sling to the rifle, which is as simple as a couple of Ranger bands, or you've got to just, as soon as you pick the rifle up and you get out of the car, throw the sling over your neck. And the reason why is actually going to show up in this video. This officer is going to need to sling this rifle to put cuffs on the guy, and he's going to have to figure out how to do that in the moment when he needs to have both hands free. So just throw that sling over your neck, officers, when you get out of the car so that you have that capability to do that. Now, that said, Mike, you know, we talk about that this isn't a difficult problem, but it is a problem, and getting that shot, settling the sight, leaving it there while you finish the trigger press does take training. It does take practice, and if you haven't practiced that in the moment, you're not going to do it when the chips are down.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Absolutely, I have nothing to add to what you just said. That's absolutely true. You have to have this stuff down pat before you hit the bricks. So in this event, let's talk about patrol carbines. You mentioned it's super important that they be available to every officer who possibly could want one. And this is exactly why. If these two officers had showed up with pistols against that rifle, it would have been a very different story. This guy could have held them off for God knows how long, or picked them off from quite a longer distance more effectively than they could with pistols. So if your agency isn't getting you a patrol rifle, they at least, as John said, they at least need to allow you to bring your own. Look, you can do church fundraisers. There's organizations that'll give you grants for this sort of thing. David Spade, my man, the comedian, bought a bunch of, I'm not mistaken, for Phoenix PD, so good for him. You know, the sling thing, people are going to say, well, John's always finding the nit to pick. It is a nit, sort of, but it's also pretty important. If you don't practice with your sling, if you don't practice donning your rifle with a sling and slinging it or putting it, you know, behind you, there's a lot involved with that. If you do it wrong and go the wrong way, you can knock it off a safe onto fire, and that trigger can very easily get caught up on a piece of your gear as you're trying to sling it. So do everyone a favor and practice slinging on your range days. Get into a safe place, make the gun safe, and everyone practice that over and over again, because it is an important skill to know.
I also want to note here, as everybody approaches, you watch our officer here, he's going to kind of fall behind. They're going to push ahead of him a little bit, and as they do, somebody's got to go ahead first. He does an excellent job here of averting his muzzle. That right there is excellent trigger discipline, excellent muzzle discipline. That tells me he's been around the block a time or two, okay? So listen, you got to realize, hey, my partner is going out in front of me, or another officer is going out in front of me. I've got to avert my muzzle so that I don't muzzle somebody unnecessarily. And of course, we always talk about with an AR pattern rifle, it's not a platform, it's a pattern. The AR pattern rifle, that when I'm on the sights, I am off the safety. When I'm off the sights, I'm on the safety, and it's exactly what this officer did. So the sling is a little tiny nitpick, okay? But in an overall sense, the way that he set up this rifle, the way that he ran the rifle, the fact that he got his hits, the way that he's averting his muzzle, this guy is well trained, and that shows up in the results.
Absolutely, yeah. The way he dipped his muzzle, like I said, this guy's been around the block a few times. He knows what he's doing. Clearly, he's well trained. Maybe prior military. I'm just guessing at this point, but very well done. I want to echo what John said a moment ago. Especially if you're LE, if you're going to have a patrol carbine, it's almost certainly going to be an AR pattern rifle. Keeping on safe when you're off the target is important. Let me talk about something else here, John. In a moment, we're going to see another officer covering down on the bad guy while this guy slings up his rifle. I can't tell from this angle if this officer is in fact aimed in on this guy or on his head or whatever. So I'm not going to pass judgment. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. But officers, understand your qualified immunity goes away in a hurry per a recent, not so recent actually now, Supreme Court decision. If you're doing things that are dangerous, that are unnecessary, then you could find yourself in a world of trouble if you have a negligent discharge. So if he accidentally discharged here in this moment, he would be in a whole heap of trouble. So I say that not judging this guy. I can't tell exactly where that's aimed, but do yourself a favor, keep it on safe and keep it aimed away. Keep it at a low ready, aimed away from your bad guy or bad girl or whatever until it's actually time to shoot, just to cover your personal ass.
Well, and one more thing I might consider here, one last little bit, is now you've got two guys focused on the guy who is down, and one guy who's in clearing unknowns in a house all by himself. Now I get it. It's a very dynamic situation. Might have been a better choice in this particular case. Leave one person not right up on this guy who you've just dropped, but to pull off him a little bit and cover him while two guys go in there and clear that. Because again, having a backup person, single man CQB, single man house clearing, that is just butthole puckering stuff. So I might not recommend that as a first choice. I get it that they just made that decision just in a split second in the moment. There was nobody else in there. So no harm, no foul. I do think this officer did a fine job. I have absolutely nothing but respect for him. A couple little nits to pick to go from an A to an A+, but this guy covered the entire community's ass.